Hey, happy Friday. So I'm drawing this morning, which is a nice change. I've been doing a lot of design related projects this week, and other than the sketch cards that I finished a couple days ago, which if you were here, you saw some of that work in progress. This morning, I am working on Secret Powers, which is the upcoming comic miniseries. It is a sequel to Saga of a Doomed Universe, which was published in 2023. That was a successful book, and to the point where it seemed obvious that I should probably pull out the idea that I had in my back pocket for many years and use it for a sequel to that story. It's not a direct sequel. It's more of it's connected. It's loosely connected. So, and I have to kind of walk a fine line because on the one hand, I want this to seem new and accessible to new readers. So you don't necessarily have to have read Doomed Universe to understand what's going on here, but if you have read it, it definitely adds an extra layer of context. So that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do with this project, and I am right now. I'm finishing the inks on the second issue. It's 3 issues. It's 54 pages per issue, so they're big graphic novel sized chapters. And this is this is the second. I will be finishing the inks probably. I want to say maybe in the next month or two, and then I will be kind of assembling the book and putting it all together with the lettering and all the other effects and adjustments that I will make to it. Uh, my plan is to start on the third issue in January and really take next year to finish the book, finish the third issue, and then we'll just see what happens. I do have some inroads with a couple of publishers that have shown interest. So fingers crossed, we'll have a good home for Secret Powers in a about I want to say a year and a half, really, because I still have to draw all the variant covers. There's going to be several variants per issue, and of course all of the associated marketing, and there's just a lot of stuff that I have to do other than just literally draw the book. There's just a whole to-do list. So anyway, thanks for hanging out. For the next hour anyway, I'm going to be working on these 2 pages. I started inking it last night, and then I worked on it a little bit very early this morning. I'll zoom out so you can kind of see. These are the 2 pages here. And I had to turn on my multi-stream chat. Hopefully this is all working. So I'm just going to kind of walk through my process and what I do. If you're a comic book artist or an aspiring artist or even a seasoned artist, there's always things to learn. I'm always trying to pick up new tools, new methods, new processes. So I'm working in Clip Studio, and as you can see here, I have several layers. I have, let's see, this is my inks layer. Below that is my pencils. I have a perspective grid below that. And even further down the line, I have my roughs, which are very sketchy basically just initial planning for the page. With this project, the finished pages they're actually going to look like the original pages. So you're going to see the blue lines, and there's going to be hand scribbled notes, and there's some aging effects on the paper. There's all sorts of really cool stuff that I'm going to apply to the finished art to give it the impression that it's a like an artist edition. If you're familiar with the artist edition books that IDW publishes, they're just high res scans on Bristol board paper, so it really duplicates the original art page. And there's a reason behind this. It's not just done to look interesting. There is a story element that this serves. So what I'm going to do now, so I've got a new layer for my backgrounds, and I usually start off with the thickest lines. The really cool thing about Clip Studio is you can get these really clean, straight lines. Eliminates the need for um, a ruler, if you were drawing it traditionally. So that definitely speeds up things. Do that one over. And all of these pictures, framed pictures, I'm going to fill with original comic art that's going to be visible in these frames. Right now, they're just going to look blank, but I have plans to. There's a lot of Easter eggs. There's a lot of meta context, just like Doomed Universe had a lot of that. I'm I'm really trying to continue with that story strategy, but in a new way, hopefully. There's probably going to be some redraws once I'm finished because I just want to make sure everything is consistent panel to panel, page to page. That's sometimes hard for me to do when I'm drawing digitally um, because I don't really have, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to have other screens open showing previous pages. So what I usually do is I print out kind of like a low res black and white copy of the finished book, and then I will compare those pages against the digital pages on screen, and then just make whatever corrections I may need to make. I know that there are some costume problems that I have to fix consistency wise. And it's just easier and more efficient for me to just kind of get through the art and then go back and assess everything and make those little corrections. Backgrounds also is a something that I'm trying to pay attention to, of course, but uh, once I print everything out and look at it together, I'm certain that there's probably going to be a few things that I need to correct to make consistent. I need to look something up real quick. But having said that, there are some inconsistencies that I will keep intact because it plays into the story. Um, I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick's work. If you're familiar with his movies, he had a lot of subtext happening, and I think some of it is intentional, and I think some of it is just his crazy fans have read into things that maybe weren't intentional by Kubrick, but some were obviously intentional. What comes to mind, for example, is there's a scene in The Shining where um, they are in the a couple of the characters are standing in the walk-in freezer in the manor, the Overlook Manor, and in the background you can see these shelves of all this canned food, and there is a uh, one of the shelves is filled with these. I think it's what is it? Baked beans, Heinz beans, or it's some kind of brand of beans that has an Indian head on it as part of the logo, and they're all facing one direction, like they're facing towards the character who is speaking. And in a later scene, they are standing literally in that exact same spot, but it's the tone of the scene is different. Now it's before it was kind of like it was a more welcoming tone to the scene. It's the caretaker of the Overlook talking to Danny, the little boy, about um, about the Overlook. And in a later scene, it's Jack stuck in that uh, walk-in freezer. He's locked in there. He's deranged and possessed by the spirits of the manor. And right behind him is that same shelf, but this time all the Indian cans are facing the opposite direction, looking away from him. And he's basically being betrayed by the spirits of the manor. So there's things like that that really intrigue me as a writer, and And so I'm trying to kind of follow that kind of line of thought with how I'm framing scenes and dealing with certain situations in the book. This is Burt Colt's rundown apartment. Burt Colt is the central character that really drives the story. Anyway, with this layer, now I can just go back and erase all the areas that need erased that cover up the figures. I found that's an easier way to do it, to draw the backgrounds. This is actually a pretty simple page. Not a lot of backgrounds tend to be the time killer, and but they are super important because if you don't establish your backgrounds and consistently draw them, I think the reader cannot suspend disbelief, and you've got to create a real world for these stories, and and I think that's really important to have a consistently drawn real world that's relatable. I think that's the problem for science fiction comics a lot of times is that first you're asking the reader to accept that this is believable and that all, when it's like high tech sci-fi futuristic stuff or alien stuff. So it's up to the artist. The artist has to continuously reestablish that. It's unlike books like this that are set in a relatable Earth. For a science fiction story, well, you can't have blank panels. You really have to continuously remind readers that, okay, keep believing this because look at this background. This makes sense, right? And I think that's the problem is that a lot of comic artists don't do that because it is hard to do it. It's time consuming. And I think that might be why sci-fi is such a hard it is a hard sell in comics. Probably in films too, really, for the same similar reasons. All right. I think for all right, so now I'm going to first I'm going to save my work. I save it in two places because I work on my iPad a lot, and sometimes it does not sync with my Dropbox. I save everything to Dropbox. And so I'll save it to my iCloud. I'll say I saved this page to my iCloud this morning so I could pull it up on my desktop. And so I'm going to save it back to my Dropbox. And I'll give you a little tour of how I have my files arranged. So this is Secret Powers. I have a folder. I try to stay really organized, and I highly recommend, especially if you're a creator, to do the same. I've got a folder that's just devoted to marketing graphics, right? So these are all just marketing things. Back matter is, what is that? Oh, it's like a fake roundtable interview with several fake comic book creators who were talking about Burt Colt. And so that's a Word document. I may or may not end up using that. I'm not sure. Covers. So I've got my covers here so far. Right now, I just have one cover. I have cover A, and I have roughs for all the other covers, the variant covers. Issue one is more or less completed. I have it split up into, so here's my Clip Studio files, and so this is where all of my editable art files exist. Um, 55 pages plus a cover. So these are all Clip Studio files. My what I'm calling layout JPEGs, those started as the very basic sketches that I showed you, very crude, like barely you can barely even understand what's happening, but I know what's happening kind of sketches. So that's where those existed. And then as I progressed, I kept saving over those until each one of these now is are the inks, but they're JPEGs. They're not the. I don't think I'm going to use those for the printed books, even though they're high res. I'm probably going to output these again as PDFs because that they will be a little smaller in file size, but they'll still be high res. And then I have a lettering folder. So um, this is where I keep the assembled book. And so I assemble it's lettered and assembled in InDesign. And so I have the actual book file, the interior pages are right here. And then I have PDF inks. So these are the high res PDF inks that I've outputted so far. And then down here, what is in here? I have TIFF files too. Not sure I really, not sure why I did those. I'll have to look at that again. But anyway, those are my PDF inks. And then I have, um, this is the actual packaged InDesign file of the book here. So that's basically how I have these arranged. Since I'm in issue two, it's starting out the same way, right? But I don't have this completed. I've got a folder for my logos, which has the Secret Powers logo. I have a folder for, these are all my halftone colors and newsprint overlay images. So what this is, they're images that look like aged newsprint, and so they will be applied to the art later. Um, Reference materials. These are just various pictures from online that I use for reference for one thing or another. And then I have the scripts. So I have the scripts in PDF format. I have them in Word documents, and then these are unused. So those were like early iterations of the story. So that's my little tour of uh, of the book. So let's save this to Clip Studios, and I'm going to take that out. I don't know why that was in there. Comic book. Wait a minute. All right, I had the wrong thing selected, I guess. All right, let's save it. Go back to Dropbox, Board, Comics, Secret Powers, issue 2, Clip Studio files. There. So I'm overriding the previous version of that file. And if you want to see more process shots and learn more about my processes and methods, you can join my Patreon page. It is free to join, and to become a member, there are 4 tiers of membership options. You can get some pretty cool rewards for joining. Anyway, I post Thursdays and Fridays, and those typically consist of whatever works in progress I'm happen to be working on that week, as well as I try to get new rewards up, things like digital comic downloads and posters and whatnot. All right, so what I'm doing here now I'm going to create the halftones. So comics in the 60s, well, even in the I think in the 50s through the probably mid to late 80s, comic artists used what's called Zipicone, and it's like a gradient screen comprised of dots that just sort of create a pattern, and the dots are very tiny, so it creates nice smooth gradients. And so this was a really popular thing for comics up until computer coloring really made that effect obsolete, unfortunately, because I think it's a really cool thing. But computer coloring, of course, introduces wide ranges of complex gradients and a wider color palette. Really changed the game for coloring comics. But my comic is set in the year 1986, which is really the height of artists using things like Zipatone. It was just prior to computer graphics coming into the market. So I'm going to go up here and select this right here. It's tone. And then I move the frequency down to about 35. And then I'm going to come over to my brush tool. And I'm going to take the opacity down to about half as well. And then let's see what happens here. So we have a nice gradient. I think I'm going to actually take that down a bit further. So now it's a little more consistent with the size and comics. I'm going to zoom out I just want to zoom out enough to see how this looks. That's about the size of a comic book page. I think, and the frequency is different on the desktop than it is on the iPad. I can do a higher frequency on the iPad. I think that's going to be okay. That's the other thing I may have to adjust. Once I print them out, I might look at it and I might say, whoa, I need to change these dot screens. But I think I'm pretty close to what I wanted. This guy is he's supposed to look a little eccentric. He's got kind of the funny hat, and He is the publisher of Saga Comics. So in the story, there is this publisher called Saga. This is the guy behind it all. I think I'm going to do another layer of Zipatone. This one is going to be maybe even um, less frequency. Let's take the opacity down. All right. Now this page, I have backgrounds to do. The other cool thing about Clip Studio when you're inking, there's a thing called stabilization. So right now I have it set to 6, which gives me a very kind of a loose line. It could even be shaky if I wanted, but it gives me a little more control over the line, and it gives it kind of a sketchiness. And then if I bring it up, for instance, to 100, that line becomes very smooth and it kind of snaps into a shape. So I did that for these speed lines, right? Because I want them to be very fluid, very clean. Yeah, do that one later. All right, then I'm going to take it back down to I put it at 6. That's really where I prefer it. I'm going to use my line tool for this energy blast here. And there's another cool feature where you can start and end your line width, so it gives it a very tapered look like that, which I think is pretty awesome. The way this used to be done was usually with a crow quill pen. And I used to use a crow quill pen a lot for inking. But in the last few years, I have not been able to find any crow quill pens that are good quality. I just can't seem to get the same look from modern Crowquill pens. I don't know if they've changed the materials they use to make them. I assume that's the case, but I just can't use them anymore. I tried. It's just like the nibs break or they bend and the ink blots up. It's just, and I've tried many different ways of doing this, but and again, it could just be me, but kind of stopped using crow quills and just went back to my brush to emulate the crow quill look. So we'll turn that starting and ending off. Accidentally shifted my pencil layer. I need to look at, I want to make sure this is right. There's another page that has this underground base, and it shows the entrance. And I need to really take a look at that. I think again, I could just soldier through it, but where is it? There it is. All right, I'm just going to drag it up here. There's another page that has a better view of it. Just have to find it. There it is. Okay. No, I guess it is. It is the same. This is the last page. I inked this one first. I will do that sometimes, just to, I don't know, like to make sure things are consistent. I think the key to drawing rocks is to not overthink it and to just stay really loose and organic with it. Um, just kind of let the pen go where it's going to go, I think, is the best method. It's also true for trees and things of that nature. And I don't get super detailed with my penciling either because I just put what needs to be there. All the information is here. Now, if somebody else were inking, then I would I would put more detail in the pencil stage just to kind of retain um, my voice, so to speak, retain my vision of what the art should look like. A really good inker understands what the penciler has intended with a particular line, and the best inkers, of course, are the ones who can draw, and so they can really accentuate and build upon what the penciler has established. A bad inker can't do that. The bad inker basically just follows the lines and doesn't have that that foundation to make decisions. And it's pretty easy to tell who's who, I think. Let's do the starting and ending again. Oh, wrong way. Yeah, this is not very clear. I'm going to zoom in and get this figure a little clearer. Let's create a layer for the backgrounds. The other thing I've learned just over the years drawing digitally, it's kind of a trap that's easy to fall into, but I always try to be very aware of the fact that I really don't need to put a lot of detail into things when the page is zoomed in to this extent. You know, you have to remember that this comic is going to be published at about, see if I can kind of estimate the size. You know, it's going to be probably about that size. And so it's real easy to get into the weeds, sort of, and just start noodling around with super detail. And then all that detail is really still going to get lost, even though printing processes are a hell of a lot better now than they were 30 or 40 years ago. You're really not going to see a lot, on a page, and too much detail can actually be distracting from the story. So it's all about finding a reasonable balance. There are some artists who do fine detail, and they're kind of known for these intricately drawn pages, um, which is great. I wonder if it's really worth it in the end. Wow, our hour is almost up already. Like that was drawn a little crooked, so I'm going to fix that. All right. Now I just need to get the halftones on this page. Let's get rid of some of this stuff here. I will sometimes let some of the lines extend over the border. I like that it just creates kind of an organic feel, just a little edge here. And I know that that's maybe just for my own satisfaction, but I feel like it kind of makes the art more analog looking and a little more flexible, if that's a good description, um, and not so rigid. Digital art, I mean, it is at the end of the day a bunch of zeros and ones, right? And I think that comes across on some level. So I try to really retain that organic look. You can see some of these I'm cleaning up, and then some of them I'm not. I'm just trying to balance it a little bit. All right, let's go up here and get our Zipatone on. Ooh, too dark. do a line. I think I'm going to do a line pattern for this area. If I can remember how to do that. Um, so you can tell I have. All right, I need to redo that though. So it used to be you would buy these in sheets, these Zipatone sheets, and some art supply stores would carry them. I don't remember where I bought them from. There must have been some place local that I was able to get them years and years ago, or maybe I might have mail ordered them. I don't remember, but I would get 5 or 6 sheets of various patterns. I mean, that looks pretty good. I wonder if I should maybe take that down a little bit and find it. Here we go. And I think the other thing I can do is to reduce the opacity. Yeah, that makes it thinner, it looks like. All right. I think I want to at least get this page done, and then I'm going to sign off for the day. All right. Think that's it. Just want to kind of clean up the blue lines a little bit. And I got to get rid of my web address down here. That's I use my standard. It's like the classic comic template, and that's for commissions. And I will put my URL very lightly in blue. But for this book, obviously, I'm doing it and being active on Patreon. So I hope to see you over there. You can also find me at beyondforwardcomics.com. And from there, you can jump over to all the various social media channels that I use and try to maintain on a regular basis. So hope to see you in one of those places. My Etsy store, if you go to Etsy, and if you're familiar with Etsy, my handle there is Beyond Forward Art. I offer commission comics, various options there, one character, multiple characters. I do 3-page comic book commissions for personal use. It's basically just private commissions. If you have a short story for your favorite character, I do those as well. I also offer digital assets for graphic designers because I am a graphic designer. And so I'm constantly adding to the Etsy store various assets for designers to use. That's it. Hope you have a spectacular rest of your day, and I will hopefully see you here tomorrow. I try to do Monday through Friday here on Twitch, and I'm also streaming through YouTube and Instagram. So I hope to see you in one of those places. Until then, have a good one.